Hello everyone, my name is Nathan and today it's time for another episode of Scrap Mechanic. In today's episode I would like to build myself some kind of a password protection for my doors, of course including some kind of a trap. Now of course we want to do this the most complicated way possible. I also would like to test a new idea. However, this is my brainstorming contraption right here, and over there we are gonna build the real thing. But let me first show you what we got here so that you know what we are going to do. So this right here is representing my door. This obviously could be anywhere, and this right here is representing the trap. So the correct code in the correct order is at the moment the first button, then the third button, then the fifth button. If I do this in a different order, even though I'm choosing the right buttons, it will still activate the trap. So just as a little demonstration, let's actually try to open up the door. We are pressing the first button for a little while, and that was actually the correct one. Then we're gonna press the third button for a little while, and that was also the correct button. And finally the fifth button, there we go, and the door is opening up. I can reset the entire contraption using this button right here, and everything will go back to its original state. Now let's try to use a bad combination. For instance, we're gonna use the second button right here, and you can see the trap activated and the door didn't open. Let's see if we can do this with something else. For instance, we are first of all putting in the right combination. So we use the first button, but now we are making a mistake. For instance, we are using the fourth button right here, and there you go, the trap activates. Now there is another scenario. For instance, we are using all of the correct buttons but not in the right order. So for instance, I'm using the first one in the right order, and then I'm going to the fifth one right here, and you can see this also activates the trap. So there we go. I'm not going to explain you all of this shebang, we're just going to build it together over there. So let me show you what we have got so far. Obviously we have to clean up some stuff here, and there we go. Let's move up right here. So right here is where I want all of my shebang to be. Right here we would have our little panel. Maybe we should actually set something up right here. I want to have a maximum of 5 buttons just because of all of the connections that we have to do. I mean, look at this. I want to make this overviewish for you guys so you know what is going on. Therefore, we are only using 5 buttons for now. Right, and these buttons are gonna go right here. So this is gonna be the input panel for the combinations. And also, just to show you what the trap currently does, if the trap activates at any given time, then we are just falling down into the pit of doom. Of course, we would have to force the player to kind of stand on here. So maybe we make the panel not accessible as long as the player doesn't stand on a sensor. That could be a thing. However, let's get to the first functionality. We need a way in order to activate these buttons, you know, to kind of keep them toggled so they have the same functionality as a switch. And this is actually easily done. We just need a little system right here. We can add that right in the back. We need sensors that are pointing upwards. I think I'm gonna put this guy right here. Then we also need large pipes, and we need curved pipes. And we're going to need a bunch of bearings. The first bearing I'm gonna add right here with a short pipe and another bearing on top of it. Then we want to take the curve into whatever direction. It currently doesn't really matter. Well, I want to have this kind of symmetrical, so I'm gonna put it into this direction, and then we're gonna add another block like so. Next up, we're gonna need 2 stopper blocks. One is gonna be right here. I don't want this to turn around more than this, and I also don't want it to go further than that. So now you can see if we turn it around this way, then it will be above the sensor and it's going to be forced to stop right there. So we need to attach a little motor onto that thing. So I'm just going to remove a little something from here, and we're going to go with an electric engine. I want to put this somewhat like this. This seems to be good. Alright, let's also hook it up to the individual bearings. This machine right here, I want to be hooked up to the bottom bearing. This should activate the sensor, and therefore it is already turning into the right direction. Later on, we're also going to have an additional engine that is going to be hooked up to the other bearing right here turning into the other direction, and the extra engine is going to be hooked up to each of these to an individual button that we're going to use in order to reset the contraption. So let me actually rinse and repeat this construction right here for the rest of the buttons. Maybe we are already going to hook up the button to the engine right here. We're going to set this to about 5 or so. There we go, and now theoretically with the button we should be able to turn this around. Of course, I cannot turn it around just yet because the upper bearing isn't hooked up. Just to prove you that it is actually working, we're gonna hook this up, there we go, and then we're gonna use this first button again, and you can see it just turned around above the sensor. Okay, I'll be right back once I have set this up for the rest of the buttons. Okay, so the first part is done, the actual input. This is some kind of an RS NOR latch, so as soon as I press the number 1 button, you can see this has turned around, activating this sensor. I can do this with all of the buttons. As you can see, they are nicely turning around, and I also have the reset switch hooked up to each of these using this last engine right here. It is turning the upper bearing into the other direction, and I've set all the engines to about 5. This seems to be a good, speed without crashing everything and forcing stuff to glitch through other things. Anyways, now we need to do something with these inputs. Once these sensors are activated, something should happen. And for that, I think we are gonna expand towards the right here. Is this a good idea? It might be. No, I'm actually gonna expand towards this side right here. We're gonna start in the center, or actually not quite the center. I want to start maybe right here. What we're gonna build now is a piston that is kind of tracking the state of our input. So I want to know, is it the first number that I'm inputting? Is it the third number? Or what the heck is it? And for that we need a multiple piston design. Basically the same thing I used for the calculator. We want to add a bearing, then go up 1, then add a bearing like so, go down 1 again, face into my direction, and add the last bearing right here. At the bottom here I want to add my controller. So we are actually going to do 3 controllers because we have 3 numbers that we want to input. So 3 number combinations we are going to do just because we want to limit all of the connections. If we go with a higher combination, it's going to be much more of a hassle to see stuff. Anyways, to the first controller we want to hook this up in the correct order, and we want to make sure that the green arrows are pointing towards the front. So right here we can set this to the normal piston settings, which are 90, 180, 90 or minus 180. Okay, now we want to rinse and repeat this for the second and the third input number. We just want to move 1 over and 1 facing towards us. Then we are gonna add the bearing, go up 1 towards us, add a second bearing, go down 1, no, not with a controller, but with this pipe, and finally add the last bearing right here. We can already take the curve, and then we want to make sure that we hook this up to the second controller right there. Cool, cool, cool. And right here we have to switch all of the arrows, as you can see. Of course, adjust all of the parameters here. 90, 180, 90, there we go. And let me quickly rinse and repeat that for the last one. Okay, there we go. Now we have 3 pistons, therefore 3 numbers, and we want to go down 1 block right here, and this is where we want to have our sensors, I think. So we are gonna build up something right here, just 2 blocks, yeah, something like that, and on top of that we can add the sensor. So this sensor right here is checking the first state. We are inputting the first number, and this is what this sensor checks. Now expanding one of these pistons will move it exactly 2 blocks, so right here is where we would want the second sensor. Alternatively, we could also adjust the parameters here and just add the sensor here. But I think it's just easier with the normal piston settings, so you don't have to remember something extra here. So let's see, we are inputting the first number, and then we would input the second number, and then the third number, and if we reach this state, then the door will open. So this sensor is opening up the door. Maybe we actually kind of mark this in some way or the other. We could use another block, just to make sure that we understand that this is the finish line here. Okay, now we need a bunch of conditions in order to activate these pistons. I mean, we could just go with a switch or a button or a sensor just to see it happening right now. If we activate this, it will go to the second number, but it should only do that if we have input the correct number. Otherwise, we want the trap to activate. So how do we do that? It's a good question. I don't remember anymore. So I guess we only want to activate these controllers if this thing here is active and we inputted the correct number for the first combination. So let's think about the combination. I want the door to open once we hit the number 2 button, then the number 5, and then number 1, only in this order. So number 2 would be the first input. Therefore, we have to hook this up to an AND gate. So let's set up a bunch of AND gates right here. We are gonna need a block and then also a sensor facing into this direction with a bearing and then the controller attached to it. We want the controller right there, then another bearing and another controller. For the first controller, we want to hook both of them up and change their direction so the green arrow is pointing upwards. And within the settings, the first one we want to set to -45 and then +15 once activated. And the second one we want to set to also +15 once activated. So if both of these are activated, this sensor will also be activated. So number 2 is the first one to be activated. Therefore, we need to take this signal if we activate number 2 and input it right here. So this is like the first condition that needs to be true. The second condition is that we are actually on this stage right here, the first input. So we're gonna hook this up to there as well. And you can see this is already turning around. So if we press the number 2 button now, this is actually activating this sensor. If we look at it, yeah, you can see the green light is on. Great, so now we only need to send a signal to somewhere in order to make sure that this piston is expanding to the next stage. We don't want to activate it directly because at some point, if we continue the game, this sensor right here might deactivate again. Yeah, because once we move to the next stage, then this sensor is not active anymore and therefore this sensor will also shut off. So we need a similar system to right here for our inputs. If we manage to get the right input, I want to have another space right here for 3 of my motors or engines. We're just gonna attach them right here and we're also gonna need sensors facing upwards. Let's add them right here, here and there. Then we're gonna need bearings here, here and there with a pipe on top of it and then another bearing. Don't forget you need a reset mechanism. And we want to attach those guys right here with a pipe to activate the sensor. And then we need the stopper blocks. One is gonna go here and the other one right there. Okay, and last but not least, we need an engine in order to reset everything. I'm just gonna hook this up right there. We want to hook this up to the upper bearing and the reset would be going into this direction, right? So we want to do this with all of them right there. Okay, and we also want to hook this up to our reset button that we have on the top. So this engine right here, so that we can reset the entire thing with one button. Now we only need to hook up these at the bottom and they are already turning into the right direction. And these motors will be activated through my combination. So if we manage to get the first number right, then this one will be activated. The first combination will be right, whatever number it is. In our case, it is number 2. Therefore, we're gonna need 2 more of these contraptions. We're gonna need 2 more OR gates. And I'm gonna put these right adjacent to here, sensors facing into this direction. A bunch of bearings, a bunch of controllers. There we go. We want to hook up everything to the bearing that it is attached to and change the direction. And last but not least, set the first one to -45, +15, and the second one to +15 only. There we go. If we get the second combination right, we should activate this engine, and if we get the third combination right, we should activate the last engine. Cool, so let's actually reset the entire contraption. Yeah, everything is reset. So now we can say if this sensor is active, we got the first combination right, therefore we want to move the piston. If we got the second combination right, we want to move it once again, and of course we want to move it one last time right here. So let's test this. First of all, we want to press number 2. It activated this sensor, which is good, which should have activated this engine, of course, but it does not have any power. And there we go, you could see this has turned around and the piston has moved to the second combination or the second stage. Cool, so now we already have like the first thing that is working. If we press number 3, then nothing really happens because this isn't hooked up to anything, but number 2 is the first button and therefore we can move on to the second stage, which should be button number 5. Okay, so let's grab button number 5, which would be this sensor, and we want to hook it up in a similar way to this second thing. So this is also the way you would reprogram the combination. You just have to disconnect these guys and hook them up to something else. However, the second input, the second controller, is dictated by the piston. So number 5 should only be a valid input if we are actually in this second stage right here. If we are in this stage, then number 5 is the button to press. Therefore, this AND gate will work. And last but not least, I said number 1 is going to be the last combination. Therefore, we need to hook this up to this guy, and number 1, which is only a valid number right here if we are at this stage. Therefore, we hook this guy up. Great, and don't forget the last one is for the actual door mechanism. So if we reach this stage, we will have been successful. So let's test this. Maybe I forgot something. So number 2 is our first input, piston is moving, then number 5 and piston is moving again, and last but not least number 1 and piston is moving to the last sensor. Therefore, we are correct. Now the only thing that is missing is setting up the conditions for the trap. So first of all, we want to make sure that we cannot use these in a wrong combination. So currently I think I can use number 5 and then I can use number 2 and then number 1, you know, kind of in a random order, and you see that it still kind of worked out. And I want to prevent this from happening. Okay, so now this part is the part that confuses me sometimes. What we want to check now is in which state we are. And if we press a certain button in the wrong stage, even though it belongs to the right combination, we want to set off the trap. So we are gonna set up something else right here, I think. Yeah, let's see what we can do. We are gonna need, once again, 3 gates. This time, I don't even know what the gate is gonna be called, but it's going to be mighty useful to us. We want to have a similar setup as before. Let me quickly do that. A bunch of sensors and bearings and controllers. You know the drill. There we go. Now we have 3 gates right adjacent to each other. I just need to hook them up and then we need to set the correct settings. And I think this one we need to handle a little bit differently. For instance, the first one I want to set to -30 and then -15. So in case we are in the correct stage, we don't want this sensor to activate. So that means we need to check in which state we are, and we do that with these guys right here. These sensors declare in which state we are. No, that was absolutely not true. It's actually the sensors over there, of course. So these sensors right here, I want to hook up to the first of these controllers right there. And I cannot do that without activating all of these sensors. Maybe I can shut this sensor off like so. Yeah, there we go. Now I think I don't activate anything. Beautiful. Okay, as long as this sensor is activated, we are in the first stage. Therefore, we want to activate this sensor and move them up. So if we now press the number 2 button right here, which is the correct button, we will still activate this controller, but it will not activate the sensor. However, if we are in a different stage, then the controller will be moved down already because we set this to +15. And if we activate the button in the wrong state, then we will activate this sensor, which will activate the trap. So we are, last but not least, gonna need some kind of an AND gate. And I think it will be a huge one. No, actually it will just contain 5 units. So we need 5 controllers, 1 for each button. So let me do that, of course, with 1 bearing in between each of the controllers. And there we go, beautiful. Okay, we don't want this to be activated because this is basically the trap. We could probably already hook this up to our trap mechanism. For that we need to delete this button here, and this is the trap thing. There we go, beautiful. Okay, currently the trap obviously is activated because we haven't hooked up these guys just yet. Okay, so this is a simple AND gate right here. That means we can set the first one to -30, +15, and the rest just to +15. So any of these guys will activate the trap. There we go. I set all to +15. And now we need to check. Let's actually get to the second stage. So we are going to activate this button right here. We are now at the second stage, which means this thing should be activated. Let me hook up all of these guys. The second stage should be hooked up to this guy. The third stage should be hooked up to this guy. And then we want to also get the right combination right here. So I said the second input is number 5. Therefore, this needs to be hooked up to the second unit. And the last input was number 1, which goes right here. So now we have set these up. We only need to hook up all of these sensors. So it's not a good thing if these sensors are activated, because that will activate the trap. But first we have to set these guys to -30, -15 and +15 respectively. There we go. Now all of these sensors are currently deactivated. That means we can take our sweet time to hook this up. Okay, so no matter which input this is, we are gonna hook this up to this first bearing right here, or the first controller. This one to the second and this one to the third. And then we have two numbers which we haven't used, which is the number 3 and number 4. So we need to hook number 3 up to one of these controllers that we haven't used. And also number 4 we're gonna grab from here and hook it up right there. Okay, now I think we have done more or less everything. Let me actually quickly check, have a little sweep through and check all of the inputs. So we want to use the wrong thing first of all, which is, for instance, number 3. And of course, number 3 simply activates this AND gate. So it doesn't do really anything other than that. And therefore, of course, the trap is being activated. We fall down and the trap even closes on top of you again. Good. Now we want to input the correct number, which is number 2. So this OR gate is working, or this AND gate over here, and therefore activating this contraption, therefore moving the piston permanently to the second stage. And you can already see we are now in the second stage. So it doesn't matter if I activate this thing right here, it will still not activate the sensor, which is a good thing. And obviously this is hooked up to our second combination number, which should be number 5. But obviously this only works if we use it at the correct stage. For instance, if I use number 5 at the beginning, then you can see this second stage right here is already turned down, and therefore it will activate the trap. So let me quickly demonstrate that. Number 5 over there on the left, you can see it is going down and therefore activating the trap. Great, I think we actually done it. The only thing that would be left to do is maybe build it a little bit more compact and then hook the trap up to something that is seriously dangerous. And last but not least, we obviously would need a door mechanism. Maybe let's do that. Just for demonstration purposes, right? We're gonna set up this little hazard door right here. And this is gonna turn around using this bearing into this direction at just 90 degrees. There we go. We want to hook this up to our last sensor right there, because this one dictates that we have successfully entered the combination, which is number 2, number 5, and number 1. There we go. And the door opens. And anything else will actually open up the trap. So number 2, number 5, then we do number 3, and there we go. Well, the trap could need a little bit of work. Let's see, we have to press the button for a really long time and then we are being pushed up right away again. So maybe we hook up the trap not to a controller but to a motor, which is permanently pushing these plates down, therefore forcing the player to go down. But you get the basic gist. There we go, guys. If you have any questions, if something felt a little bit odd to you, let me know. Okay, just as a quick recap, a little overview over the different modules. Right here we are storing our input, which is then going to an AND gate, checking the various stages and the correct inputs. If we have the correct inputs, it will be signaled over here and also stored in an RS NOR latch, moving this piston right here a little bit further to the next stage, which will activate one of these guys, looking for the right combination. Right here, obviously, we have the state checker piston, which is sending a signal over here, checking in which state we are and if we are pressing a wrong button. So only one button corresponds with one stage. And finally, we have the AND gate, all of the conditions which are activating the trap. There we go. Let's actually see if I cannot manage to get this trap working. Come on. Ah, there we go. We actually fell down. Okay, that is a satisfactory end to this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great time and see you soon. Bye bye.